to. Let's say you're shopping for a new car. These days, of course, you go online, you compare prices, you compare dealerships. All the dealerships have websites and all that kind of stuff. You may go into a dealership and actually test drive a vehicle. But let's say, like I did a number of years ago, I decided that I was really interested in this four-wheel drive Toyota Highlander. And so that's the car I decided I was going to purchase. At that point, it was just a matter of finding the right one, right color, the right deal. But when I got the idea of that car in my brain, guess what I started seeing out there on the road all the time? I started seeing every Toyota Highlander. And I think that's always been a good example to me that whatever we decide to put in our mind will start determining what we see out there in the world.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. Today we're going to feature another legacy podcast featuring Dr. Mark Laaser and myself, Randy Evert, as we discuss the topic of having a healthy vision. Here now is Dr. Mark Laaser and the Faithful and True podcast.
Today we're going to talk about vision, I think.
Vision is a very important subject, Mark.
Well, I think so often is the case that we've talked about this before, like a lot of things, but today I really want to focus on it. I think one of the important features of purity, fidelity, is not just what we're stopping, but what we're starting. And one of the main challenges to sexual purity is to keep negative or lustful thoughts out of your brain. And I've always thought that one of the ways to keep thoughts out of your brain is to crowd them out with thoughts that you choose to put in your brain. So today we're going to talk about that in terms of developing a vision for yourself, for your life.
Now, is that a list of pre-planned positive thoughts that you want to use to ward off those harmful thoughts?
Well, I think it could be a list in terms of actually sitting down and spending some time creating vision. But I do think it does involve more of a conscious decision about what you're going to try to focus on in your life in general, and then kind of get out of the way, because when you start putting thoughts in your mind, they then will become more preoccupational.
A little touch of the power of positive thinking?
Well, thank you, Norman Vincent Peale.
I'm full of them, or full of something.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think there have been great preachers along the way, Norman Vincent Peale being one of them, that captured the idea that we are what we think, and we can make choices about what we think about more so than what we, I think, normally realize. I have a kind of a interesting example of it, I suppose, that I've used for a lot of years, and that is, it's an example that I think the average listener could maybe relate to. Let's say you're shopping for a new car, and these days, of course, you go online, you compare prices, you compare dealerships. All the dealerships have websites and all that kind of stuff. You may go into a dealership and actually test drive a vehicle. But let's say, like I did a number of years ago, I decided that I was really interested in this four-wheel drive Toyota Highlander. And so that's the car I decided I was going to purchase. At that point, it was just a matter of finding the right one, right color, the right deal. But when I got the idea of that car in my brain, guess what I started seeing out there on the road all the time? I started seeing every Toyota Highlander that was,
on the road,
the routes that I was on. And I think that's always been a good example to me that whatever we decide to put in our mind will start determining what we see out there in the world.
It kind of fine-tunes your focus as well. I've experienced the very same thing. When it comes to cars, it's funny. Having two sons, my youngest son, who is a student at Iowa State drives one of those little Scions, the little shoebox on wheels.
Yeah.
And I can admit that I barely noticed them previously until he owned one.
Sure.
And then once he has one, I see them everywhere I go. It's kind of funny. And if I see one his color, it catches my attention because I know he's away at school, but I still look to see who the driver is.
That's right. You're thinking that it might be him driving home for one of those surprise
home visits.
College. I need laundry done and I need money.
And I need it now.
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, there could be other examples. You have a son now at Iowa State. My guess is that anytime anything about Iowa State would come up on the news, or see people wearing Iowa State paraphernalia around here, you would tend to focus on.
Sure.
So let me just ask the listeners to think about, what are the things that you notice out there in the world, and would it not have something to do with what you regularly put into your brain, or what you at some level decide to put in your brain? Now, let's go back and look at the negative part of this, that if you are putting sexual images in your brain through, pornography on the internet and so forth, that's going to determine a whole lot more about what you see out there in the world also. So if you're looking at images of attractive people on the internet and, sexual positions and poses, that's going to affect what you see, when you're out there in everyday life, whether it's, work or the health club or church even, what you decide to put in your brain is definitely going to affect what you see. So that's one of the basic principles that this whole show is going to focus on, how we can make more choices, really, to put healthy thoughts into our brain, and that will then determine also what we see.
Well, that sounds like a healthy way of trying to manage the visions, manage the thoughts that do, fill our mind and fill our consciousness.
Yeah. So, for some reason, I think about my colleague out in North Carolina, Eli Machin. He used to do, maybe he still does, I'm not sure, a vision lecture. It used to last about an hour and a half. He really got cranked up with this thing. And one of the people that he always talked about in terms of having vision was Michelangelo. And Michelangelo evidently said one of them was, everything is created twice. So in other words, he's a great sculptor, a great painter, and he said everything is created twice. It's first created in the mind, and then it's created in reality. One of the examples he gave was evidently one of his sculptures, the Archangel Gabriel, and he said he would start with a block of stone, granite, and with that particular sculpture, he said, I saw the angel in the stone, and I carved until I set him free. And so I don't know why I like that so much, but I do think that how often has it been the case for any of our listeners that they get an idea of something they want to do, and then they start seeing, every probability of actually achieving that idea or getting to the idea, whether they're involved in art or work projects or whatever else it happens to be.
Sure.
This center that we're in, this counseling center where our studio is here, it started as a picture in Debbie's and my brain. We were renting space at another office facility, and I was getting kind of tired of all the control that the landlords had on that space, including the thermostats and everything else. They encased the thermostat in plastic, and control freak like me got a little fried with that in more ways than one, actually. So, we started talking, what would it be like to have our own counseling center? Mm-hmm. And one of the points that I want to make along the way, I'll just introduce as I get more into this story, but I think sometimes one of the things that can happen is that our initial picture or vision might have elements of a fantasy in it, but then reality or God will come along and correct that fantasy to actually be consistent with what his plan is for our life. So I think the counseling center is a great example of that, because when I first got the picture in my mind of a counseling center, the picture was, based on our travels to the Northwoods, about a Northwoods type atmosphere landscape. It was like 10, 15 acres. It was a post and beam or timber frame building, probably 15,000 square feet, had a bunk room in it so we can house our workshop participants.
I like that you dream big. Your visions are grand.
Well, yeah, it started out grand. It had a stable. We had horses so we could do equine therapy. It had a massive kitchen so we could, not have to go out to eat, but prepare meals for the participants. It had a space for Debbie and I to live in, so it was kind of our dream of. Oh, and it was on a lake too. I mean, so that there could be boating, and it was going to be, the workshop was going to be like going to summer camp, I think. So then, we said, where are these buildings, and where is this kind of land? And then, of course, Debbie and I said, well, we really don't want this counseling center to be more than a 10-minute drive from our house.
Yeah, but I thought there were going to be living quarters there. Wait a second.
Yeah, so, and we quickly discovered that land was $1 million an acre. I don't know. That's unrealistic. But around here in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, I mean, land is pretty expensive. Then we went down because, again, we still got this vision. So we go down to the annual timber frame log cabin show at the Minneapolis Convention Center, and we're going around these great builders, and we're looking at all their great products. And their first question to us was, "Where's your land?" And we said, "We don't have any land." And he said, "Well, come back when you have land."
Where are my horses?
So we're getting kind of discouraged with our vision. One of the things that happened, though, is that given the fact that we had the vision somewhere about having our own counseling center, now we're also when we're driving around, we're seeing all real estate, since we're seeing all corporate sites and all that kind of thing. So one day we're actually driving from our old counseling center to our house, and a sign had gone up here on the highway we're on, office, town, condominiums or something like office, town,
business center. Yeah.
Town offices. That was it. I didn't know what a town office was. But as it turned out, they were erecting 10 offices that were like townhomes. You own it, but it's part of a larger complex. And so we called the builder, and to make a long story short, we wound up purchasing one of those units. And for those that have been to our counseling center, they know that there's kind of a pond in the back, there's some woods in the back, there's some deer in the back.
Kind of a nature preserve behind us.
Yeah, it's an actual natural state-owned wetlands back there. In our big group room where we do the workshop, there's a couple of faux beams, fake timber frame type beams up there. We have fireplaces, in our office. So the original vision was way too grandiose. I mean, it needed to be corrected, but it did affect for a year or more. When that eventually led us to see the opportunity to own this building here, and that was over 8 years ago. And I personally love that story because it always reminds me that when you put something in your brain that you really feel called to do, it will start directing other things in the world that we actually see.
Time now for the trigger of the week.
Well, Randy, in light of our topic today, and this, again, was given to me as one of the possibilities from our Tuesday night men's group. Trigger of the week is a very, very broad and general one, television. We're talking about vision today. In my never-ending attempt to be
creative and on subject, then we're going to continue our conversation about vision with television.
Television. Well, it's consistent with the theme that whatever we put into our brain is going to determine what we see out there in the world. So if we're putting a lot of images into our brain from the media, that's going to determine what we see. Like, for example, last week with all the events in Boston, how many of us are now aware more so of crowd situations? Or, we're going to be noticing more things. We're going to be noticing people with
Backpacks.
that are setting the backpack down. I remember, back after 9/11, getting on a plane, looking for people that look suspicious. The events on television or in the media are going to determine a lot about what's in our brain and what we see out there in the world. I was thinking about it this morning because some mornings I try to go to our health club, and our health club is like a lot of health clubs. They have, lots of televisions. So this is like 8 o'clock in the morning, and you would like to think that at 8 o'clock in the morning, television would be fairly family friendly. And I'm watching one of the network morning shows. I won't identify the one, but it's one of the 3 or 4 that there are. And as I was running on the treadmill, I was just noticing the amount of stimuli, sexual innuendo that was even a part of that, the joking, the teasing. Some of the guests they had who were Hollywood people, and they had the editor of People magazine on because this is the week the world's most beautiful list is coming out, and so I'm watching the segment on the world's most beautiful, and now all of a sudden I'm looking around the health club and saying, oh, who are the most beautiful people in the room? And so the trigger of the week is consistent with our theme in terms of what we're taking in visually. And if it's television and all its messages, it is in fact going to help determine what we see out there in the world or what we're looking for out there in the world.
And it lets you, the call and the challenge is to have you self-manage what you do with those visions, right?
Yeah, well, it goes back to one of the themes of the show that if we're going to steward, Greg Miller was on our show last week, and he uses this word about temptation and lust that, we can't avoid it, but we can steward it. And I think one of the ways to steward our decisions about, what kind of images we try to put in our brain. But sexuality in and of itself is about the drive instinctually inside us to be creative, to be productive, to be passionate. And so I do think that when we're conscious of the fact that we're trying to maybe put thoughts in our brain that are healthy ways of using our creativity, our productivity, and our passion, that will then start directing our thought life. That will start directing what we see out there in the world. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so very long ago, Randy, that we were catching a vision about even doing this radio show, right? And at that point, would it not be true that we started noticing on the internet, maybe other people who were doing shows or podcasts? We were at Best Buy and we started looking around for microphones, stuff like that, right?
Well, that's so on target. We even visited another gentleman here in the area that has a financial advisory firm, and he has an online show. His name is Peter McClellan, very brilliant guy. Invited us over to the studios in their office, and that enhanced my vision of this. You started it out by sharing your vision with me. Yeah. We involved Ben from the technical aspect. He started to research the equipment. I went to saw the other show, and we have a very similar studio setup because we saw someone doing it right. Yeah. Which we wanted to do from the start, and it really helped kind of define our vision.
Well, I think we got a picture in our brains about what a radio studio looks like, and today happens to be the first episode of the show that we're actually video recording, so some of our listeners can actually see how basic it can be. But this leads me to, I think, an important point, because one of the things we're talking about today, I want to stay with the idea of the radio show here, but if our picture in our brain is something that serves ourself, our sense of importance or our sense of grandiosity or whatever it is, that picture might have more to do with fantasy, because fantasies, usually will be imaginary pictures in our brain of things that will meet our needs in perhaps some selfish ways. Whereas I think a true vision is a picture that comes into our brain, and if it's consistent with God's plan, call, and purpose on our life to serve, then it's amazing to me how oftentimes God, through the power of the Spirit, will open the doors because that's a vision consistent with serving. So we joke about this all the time, Randy, you and I, because, we've both been on stage, we've both been performers in our life. It's like, if the vision of this show is to glorify you or me or Ben or anybody else, that's not going to go very well. But if our vision for this show is to serve the listeners with helpful information that will allow them to be the people that God calls them to be, then I think God honors that picture, and God will bless that. And God has been blessing this show. We had some men come to our workshop last week that came because they'd heard this show, and they had some amazing experiences. And I hope and pray that they will turn their lives around to be faithful men, men of sexual integrity and purity. They will restore their marriages. They will be better parents to their kids, and all of that kind of stuff. Perhaps all because of the radio show. So the radio show should be only a vehicle for God's purposes. When it is that, then it's consistent with a vision. And if we have a vision that's God's vision, how exciting and stimulating that is. I mean, how much fun has it been for us to, pull this together, buy the equipment, do whatever we've done, and how much fun it is every week to look forward to doing it.
Well, and it's even more, that statement is so true, and to see the results, as you witnessed last week with the men's workshop, with those that had come because they heard us on the show, to me that provides that extra spark of keep doing what we're doing. It's we're trying to make it better every week. We're trying to expand the outreach of the show. And because of that, we're being approached by other radio shows. A show from Phoenix, Arizona just contacted us yesterday. It looks like they would very much like you to be a guest on their show. I checked out their radio show. The gentleman's name is Dustin Daniels, and he has a ministry there. We'd be very interested in having Dustin as a guest on our show. So the show as a ministry kind of continues to spread its arms and reach a wider audience, which to me is really a rewarding aspect of the show itself.
I like that name, Dustin Daniels. It's alliterative, isn't it?
Yeah.
But let's just hammer the point that to not just summarize, but to really help the listeners focus on the idea, and this is part of what we're talking about, the idea that putting healthy pictures, healthy images, healthy vision in your brain will drive your creativity, productivity, and passion. It will be consistent with God's plan and purpose if it is for the purpose of serving others. And get out of the way because, the joy, the excitement, the energy you'll have. I mean, how many of us would say, or how many of you listening would say, that when your motivation in life is based on a vision, then you can work all day long and not grow weary, as the Bible would tell us. So I think as we near the end of the show today, I'd like to issue some challenges to the listeners to take some time and think about just a couple of questions that I would pose to them today. Because I think one of the ways to know your calling is to know, which is about your vision, is what in your life has given you the greatest sense of joy. Joy is really bound up in this for me. I noticed, we seem to keep getting a little preoccupied with the theme here of the radio show, but I noticed that when the idea about doing the show came up, there was a very old part of me that had always been fascinated with radio, old-time radio growing up as a kid, radio broadcasts of baseball games. I think there had always been a part of me that was very interested in radio broadcasting, and the whole idea of doing this produced a sense of excitement, joy in me. It was really stimulating. And so I'd challenge the listeners to think about, any ideas about moving forward or visions for moving forward in your life. Do they create a sense of excitement or passion or joy? And Satan's going to get in there and say, well, there's no way realistically that you could ever do such a thing. And I'd just be aware of that, because if you have a vision and it is one that creates joy and passion in you, get out of the way, because it's hard to imagine what God can help you pull off. I think the other thing about vision for the listeners to be thinking about, is that these ideas, these pictures, these mental images will create joy, and they will also have a sense of deeper meaning in them. They will serve. When we do the men's workshops, at the end of the workshop, I always challenge the men to get some short-term visions in their brain about what it would mean to have sexual purity for the first time in their life. And I have them get a mental picture of a group of men at a support group affirming them for 1 month of sobriety, or eventually 1 year of sobriety. What would that look like to have people applauding? What would it look like to see a smile on your wife's face as opposed to a frown, or a look of deep disappointment or sadness? I think what I'm saying is that these positive mental pictures or visions create the motivation that will drive us to do whatever it takes to be the men that God calls us to be.
Thank you for joining us today on the Faithful and True podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed this opportunity to listen to the wisdom of Dr. Mark Laaser as he talked about having a healthy vision. We hope that if this message has reached you and opened your eyes to the help that we can offer you at Faithful and True, we invite you to visit our website, faithfulandtrue.com, where you'll find many resources. You'll find over 550 podcasts, such as this one, to help you on your healing journey. We also have all of the information and online registration for our 3-day intensive workshops. We offer the Men's Journey Workshop every month, and we invite you to take a look at that. We'd love to have you come visit us and take part in that 3-day event. We also have the Women's Journey Workshop for the spouses of men that struggle with sexual addiction. And we have 2 different versions of our Couples Journey Workshops. Take a look at the information on our website and give our office a call to register for either one of those events. In the meantime, we hope that this coming week will be a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.